Okay, that's really good. There are a couple of things. Number one, let me share with you a real story from many, many years ago in my life. I was about 13 and a half, 14 when Iran was going through this revolution. Now, you walk the streets every morning and there are thousands of people marching the streets, all shouting justice and for the Shah to be thrown away. Soldiers come on a truck, jump off the truck, open fire. And I say, as a 13-year-old, shoot me. I don't mind. I am fighting and dying for a good cause. One of the things about mass movements is that you lose yourself in the mass movement. And the mass movement connects yourself to something that basic daily life won't do. See, right now you sit there. You're quiet, you're meek, you're innocent, you're dignified. Your goals are little. I want to finish school. I want to go home and have food. You watch a little TV. But then all of a sudden as you walk out, there are thousands of students marching the quad. Justice, fairness. You're no longer a little Lena. You belong to a group of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people. That's magic. The mass just swallows you. Now, that is a conformity that's not up to you. Okay? You just get sucked in like a whirlpool. There is another form of conformity. See, when you're a kid, most kids, not all of them, because temperament is also very important. Some kids, when you pay attention to them, they may be 2 or 3, they like other kids. And they like other kids to like them. So they go to them and say, you like to play with my toy? And what they're saying is, if you be my friend, when I look at you, I see my own reflection. I can feel better about being at the park. I don't want to be alone. And then little by little you conform, and it happens instinctually, intuitively, as children. Then there comes a point where you're socialized, where your parents tell you, eat your food at the table. Don't just talk when other people are talking. They begin to socialize you. So when you come to class, this class, you don't just open your mouth and talk, you raise your hand. That socialization is also part of conformity. Then something strange happens. At the age of 18, you say, Mom, Dad, I want to go and live on my own. So you get a job at In-N-Out. Now, you don't like your boss. You don't like your customers. Now, you want to fight back, but you say, if I get fired, my paycheck, my rent, my laundry, food, what the hell am I going to do? What do you do? Little by little, you get rid of the stuff that are rebellious, and then you begin to conform. Now, it's not bad. It's not bad for one reason. Eventually, when you get into a relationship, you need to know how to conform. You can't create friction all the time, man. Your companion will leave you. So up to a certain point, you compromise. You conform to the desires of your companion. You conform to the desires of your parents. Otherwise, they'll kick you out and they won't put you on their will. There is also another way that you conform, but you rebel. Now, you mentioned the Buddha, you mentioned Jesus Christ, so let me tell you a little about them. If you want to talk about Jesus Christ, the first thing you need to do is go back in history some 2,000 years ago. There is no Oakland. You don't have cities or villages that occupy 5 million people. You have Nazareth. Population, 700. You think they got gender issues? You think they got divorce issues? You think you got crime issues? You think there is internet? You think there is capitalism? No. For 1,500 years before that, they were all Jews. 1,500 years. They go to synagogue every Saturday. Their marriage vows are all Judaic. There are no backyards, only front yards. And what do people do? They come out and they talk. What do they talk about? Yahweh. El Shaddai, Elohim. And that's even complicated because in Judaism, initially, there is no hell. There is no heaven. Things begin to change. You think people look at their parents and say, Mom, Dad, I'm 18, I'm out? No. Physical punishment. You say anything that's nasty to your neighbor, not only do you get your ass kicked by the neighbor, you also get your ass kicked by your parents. You think there is democracy there? God is everywhere, man. You conform to the ways of Yahweh. End of story. So Jesus is born. Now, it doesn't matter how he was born, whether Mary was a virgin or not. That's another complicated issue we can talk later on. Where is he born in? Parents, Jews. Community, Jew. Everywhere you go, there is religious components. Everywhere. Do you really think you can badmouth Yahweh? Do you really think you can burn the Talmud or the Old Testament? No. There is something about Jesus Christ, as there is something about Lao Tzu, as there is something about Malcolm X, as there is something about Mahatma Gandhi. There's a fire in the belly. They conform. But there is something bubbling inside them. I'm not talking about the stupid belief system you got. That's mostly unexamined, unrefined. Something about them, man. It just doesn't sit well. I want God, I just can't see it. I can't taste it. I want to believe in what my parents are telling me. I just can't. You know, it's like your boyfriend telling you, I love you, but something inside you says, no, that's BS. His action doesn't express love. It's only words, and they are cheap. Now, at a certain stage in his life, he says, the hell with conformity. The hell with Judaism. The hell with my parents. As the Buddha says the same thing. The hell with Hinduism. The hell with Jainism. The hell with my parents. What does Moses do? I mean, if the story is true, this guy has power. What are you guys here for? Money, fame, fortune, riches. What does he do? He's got fire in the belly. I want to know who I am. I thought I was a prince. I'm not. I mean, you just read the stories right? Malcolm X initially saying, white people are bad. They can't sit at my table. They can't eat my food. Then he has another experience where he says, no, everybody is welcome at my table. They just need to be of a mind that has the capacity to examine, to reflect, to think. To be honest, not self-deceptive. There are stages to our growth and evolution. And I talked about education for one simple reason. It is a profoundly painful experience. See, you're here for a grade. But if you were to sit back and you ask yourself, why do I need the grade so bad? You realize you are fearful of your future. Why? Because you have a culture that doesn't care for you. And then the next question is, why do I live in a culture that cares so little? You need health care, man. Why do you live in a political system that doesn't give you health care? Well, what are you going to do about it? What, you're going to fight a system? No. What will you do? You have to conform. You're not going to remain 20 for the rest of your life. Your body is frail. You'll get sick. You need money. And all of a sudden you say, I was rebellious, creative at the age of 20. What the hell happened to me? Life happened. How often do you go to a doctor and fight with him or her? You realize, and it's a pain that lives inside your body. You're not imagining things. Education is a painful process. Why? Because someone needs to jackhammer inside you and bring the good stuff out. Not thoughts, not imagination, not faith, not belief systems. If you want to know how all of this stuff works, read the biography of Malcolm X. It's a gem. Don't read the Gospels. Don't read Mahatma Gandhi. Don't read the life story of the Buddha. If you want to be rebellious, you need to understand some very, very basic facts of life. And they are painful. Now remember, the first deadly sin in Catholicism is pride. What is pride? Every single one of us in this class think profoundly highly of ourselves. I know. I'm right. My position is this and my position is that. Why is it that pride will never be examined? Sloth. It's laziness. And it's also painful. And what happens if I step on your toe? You have another sin coming out. Wrath, anger. Do you know how difficult it is to get rid of all these 7 components? Very difficult. For most of us, impossible. Now, if you want to know why we are at this particular position in our history, like anything else, you need to go back in time. And if that's a little vague, let me clarify. What is history? History is a set of events, and then someone interprets those events. Yeah.
When you said, like, when other countries who are poor have something like that, I've never been outside of America.
Okay.
So I'm not poor.
So I'm from El Salvador, and my grandparents are Jewish, and I think by that is there's a lot of people in our community that don't think they don't miss Sunday church. They go out, and also, they don't have much, won't take. That's just the that's rural life.
There are some cultures that are shame cultures and some cultures that are guilt cultures. Let me now, when Japan suffered a hurricane some years ago, and they have found, people, regular people, common people like you and I, had found all these treasures, like floating on water or in these abandoned places. And it was really funny because every day on the news, they would say that so-and-so turned this particular box or that particular box to the government, and they're waiting for the owners to come by and pick them up. You find something, and you and I do it all the time. You know, it's like you go to the bathroom at Tower Building and there's a phone on the counter. Well, you can pocket the phone. You know, you can sell it, but you also say, well, I have a phone. In my phone, I have pictures of my family. You know, I have stories that belong to this and that person. You know, it's part of who I am that lives inside this phone. Why the hell would I want to invade someone's privacy? Yes, I can make $300. And despite you working at In-N-Out 50 hours a week, you take the phone, you go to Lost and Found in the library and you say, I found this phone. Now, we are talking about just you, Zion. Laney has about 13,000 students. Let's just say, and this is just figuratively, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that most people at Laney, should they find a cell phone, they will take it, go somewhere, sell it for $1,000, pocket the money. And depending on their history, they'll either give it to the church, give it to their parents, smoke it, drink it, sex it away. You! When you were born, your parents told you never lie, never cheat, never steal. In Japan, you have that culture, never lie, never cheat, never steal. I'm not saying that you can't find it in America, but poor countries where your name, in China, for example, nobody calls you by your first name, Zion. Well, how old is Zion? 19! What's your last name? Abiodia. How old is your last name? Centuries. You see, you don't really want to contaminate your last name. Why? Because your last name lives in the streets. People know your mom. People know your dad. People know your grandparents. Should you do anything wrong, you have tarnished your mom's last name, which means that in certain places, your mom can't walk the streets anymore. You have messed it up for her. When you live in a shitty place like this, where you have to say, I hate my mom, I hate my dad. You come to class, how many you smoke? All of the hands go up. You have no respect, not even for your name. So what do you have in the third world countries, for example? They don't have money, but they have religion. They have tradition. They have a name they desire to protect. Let me ask you this, if this is still a little vague. I know you're in a relationship. Do you ever keep a secret from your companion? Yes, but you do. Why? Because if you come out and tell him what you have done, he's not going to look at you the same. Okay? He's going to lose respect for you. He's going to not trust you as much. And that's eventually going to damage the relationship. And that's what you have in the third world. He has a last name. Now, this is America. If this was El Salvador and I was his teacher and he wasn't coming to my class, I would call his parents. And his mom and his dad would harass him every goddamn day. Now, you may say harassment is bad, but that particular harassment will keep him in school. When he's 30, he will have his PhD. Here, when someone harasses you, you complain. Then when you get 35, you say, I should have finished school. Here, harassment goes against you. There, harassment goes for you. See, you can be rich and poor in a couple of ways. You can be rich in having material goods, but rich in the spirit, in tradition, in culture. Or you could be poor in culture and tradition and rich in money. America, for the most part, is rich in money, poor in spirit. You don't have very many people who suffer from depression in India. At least they didn't used to. Or many parts of Africa or Afghanistan. I mean, talk about Afghanistan, man. For the past 40 years, bombs have been dropping on their heads on a daily basis. Why do they don't need therapy? Rich in culture. It's a foundation. Lena and then Dave. Oh, wait. You had something to say? Zonia, I said?
I did, but it's the time came.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, Dave.
Two questions. First is, where's the equilibrium of culture and riches? And then second, to understand why we struggle with it so much. It's a bunch of runaway people that came here and slaughtered and took away from people that were here. So they lost their own culture and doing what they did.
Well, there are a couple of things. Look, a couple of things. Culture, I don't have my markers, but culture comes from two words. Cult, you guys all know what a cult is. A cult is a group of people, right? And then you have your, which means that the condition of a being. It's also the word cultivation, which, you want to plant some seeds in the ground. What do? You roll-till it, right? You cultivate it. You bring the nutrients from the underground, you bring it to the top. Okay? Now, it usually takes a long time to create history. Look, She had, a few days ago, I don't know if you were here, she has been with her boyfriend for 5 years, 10 years, 5 years. Versus she has been with her boyfriend for 2 weeks. She's had 2 weeks of creating stories. She's had 5 years of creating stories. If she does something wrong in her relationship, she's going to look at the guy and says, we've been together for 2 weeks. She's not going to feel much guilt, much shame. She, on the other hand, if she does something wrong, her guilt will be immense. Why? She's had a longer history. Okay? India is 5,000 years old. Africa is the cradle of civilization. The longer the history, the more stories. The more stories, the more points of contact. Okay? America is only 300 years old. Stories take a long, long time to be created. Sit your ass down and write a novel. Any novel. And you realize it's going to take you at least 5-10 years. Because you're not seasoned enough, refined enough, mature enough to sit down and write a novel in 5 weeks or 10 weeks. Now, J.R. Rollins, T.S. Eliot, Plato. Most of the people we talk about in this class, they can sit and write a great novel. Why? They've had a great history, relationship with literature, with thinking, with words, with imagination. Imagination initially is the cradle of all young people. Every person who's young looks at the older people and says, I certainly don't want to turn out to be like him. Okay? All of us have no choice but to be filled with imagination. The thing with imagination is eventually you get tested by time, by life. You know, you think your boss is wrong? Go ahead. Imagine that you can stand up to him. Imagine that he will listen to you. Imagine that he will accept you. Go ahead, do it. He will fire your ass. And that imagination will be crucified by realities of life. What are you going to do now with paycheck? What are you going to do with rent, with money? What are you going to say to your dad, to your mom when you tell them you lost your job? And eventually your dad is going to sit down and say, Dad, listen, son, the world is a cruel place. It's a den of thieves. You'll find that in the Gospels. Don't try to look for justice down here. Don't try to look for goodness down here. You can't find it. Get a job. Get a good job. If your boss is a piece of shit, just look the other way. Because you need rent. We need money. And what happens? Your imagination gets refined. Now it lives within the boundaries of life's reality. See, when you're young, your imagination knows no bound. When you get a little older, now it lives in a frame. And by the time you get to be my age, man, you got none left. It's just survival from this point on. We're just trying to walk without our knees, giving us pain. That's all. Yeah, Charles?
You talk about how, cultures in India, how people in India, they don't have as much therapy because they have culture. Are you, saying that people can find fulfillment in their culture?
Oh, no. When you read, I think most of the questions that people ask, just read Genesis chapter 1. Don't read anything else in life. Just read Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. What happens when we fall? Life is filled with struggle. It's a veil of tears. Blood and sweat. That's how it's said in Genesis. See, if you live in a culture such as India, for example, you will be poor. Life will be struggle. But you have dignity. If you live in a culture that's not really very old, life is a struggle, but you feel entitled. Life owes me. Life for all of us are difficult. Okay? Some people tackle the difficulties with a good amount of self-respect, intelligence, wisdom, insight. And some people are just crude. I mean, look at Mike Tyson. I don't know if any of you in this class know Mike Tyson or have seen him box. Man, when he was like young, he was crappy. He had so much anger inside him that he could beat anybody up in the first round in the first like couple minutes. And his language was bad. Just the way he spoke was bad. Now see him at the age of 50, 50-some. This is a man who thinks. This is a man who cares. You know? It's not that his life is any better. He just knows how to approach his life differently. Have you ever been a drunk? Let me just say this and we'll go home. See, when you become a drunk, an alcoholic, something really strange happens. It begins with a glass or two or a can or two. Then it becomes like 5 or 6, then 10, 20. Then your wife or your husband or your kids or your parents say, what the hell are you doing? You're drinking too much. No, I'm a social drinker. I know my body. I know my capacity. Nothing wrong with that. Eventually, after a few conversations, your wife will say, you know what? Fuck you, I'm out. I don't want to be with you anymore. And then your kids will begin to hate you. And then your parents will disown you. But you'll continue drinking. You got 2 issues now after a while. There comes a point where you realize you are a drunk. You realize you are a drunk. And when you realize you are a drunk, what you don't know is that drinking or being a drunk is an addiction. In aside from being a drunk and an addict, you've also lost your wife, your kids, and your parents. You got a whole host of issues to deal with. It's going to take you 20, 30, 40, 50 years, a lot of going back and forth. You overcome the addiction. And the way you do it, you take your phone, you look at all the contact people, you delete all of them. You move from Oakland, you go somewhere else. And you go to AA meetings every single day, if you can. You change your friends. Forget depression, we'll talk about that later. That's going to be a killer. And you're going to go back and forth. Watch Robin Williams interviewing on drinking, Al Pacino. You think you can do this on your own? You can't. No human being could ever understand anything by themselves. It's impossible. Then after 30 years, you recover. Then something strange happens. Once you recover after 20 years, you go and sit at the very center of this group and you say, I used to be a drunk. I lost my wife. I lost my husband. I lost my kids. I lost a kidney. I lost this. I lost that. But eventually, I realized that I am a drunk and now I can control my emotions when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to anger, when it comes to loneliness, when it comes to depression. I know what all of you are going through. Now what you have is a language that's universal to the 20 people who live in the group. Now that is having a relationship, a good, honest relationship with your history. You're poor, but you know how to use it to your advantage. And when you know how to use your poverty, it helps other people as well. Stan, how are you doing? It's okay? I'm sorry? Oh, Stan, you and I have lived. Yeah.
How old are you, Stan? You don't mind? 72. And it's 72. I'm 62. I'm not as old as Stan. This gentleman is 72.
I'm 81.
81.
Thank you.
I'm 92. Listen, before you guys leave, let me just say this. First, thank you for showing up to class. Second, I know sometimes these things I say may touch you the wrong way. So for that, I apologize. Third, don't take anything that I say personally. Do not be offended. I began by saying that education is a very, very painful process. It really, really is. Okay? It is Zoni. Be like Zoni. Should you ever encounter that I say something that it rubs you the wrong way, raise your hand. Give it to me in the form of a question, not a statement. Ask for clarification. Look, I have been in this business for 30 years. I started enjoying this business when I was 11. I know some of in this class are intense Christians. Good for you. But I gotta tell you, I have read books that you haven't. I have had experiences that you haven't. It doesn't mean that I'm better than you. What it does mean is that I have perspectives, viewpoints that you may not have. And it may be difficult for you to hear them, but hear them nevertheless. It's good for you. One day you may find yourself in India, and you may find yourself in the presence of Thomist Christians who believe that Judas was a savior. You need to know that. Otherwise, the Indians will kick you out. There are people of faith very much like you. Don't get messed up with words, with language. Jesus is a big man. There are too many points to him. You know, it took 400 years for the New Testament to be put together by different groups of people we don't even know. 400 years. We don't really know who wrote the Gospels. We don't know. There is the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Nicodemus. There are all these Gospels. There is nothing wrong with having your language be seasoned by little humility. It's okay. Again, do not be offended by the things I say. You're friends. Have a nice day. I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. If you have friends who are looking for classes to take, this is a great class.